I've always been holding to the thought, since I learned about it, that quantum mechanics has been a displacement location whereby the portion of electrodynamic theory that the social engineers of our society did not want us to know about, they went and relegated it to physics, calling it quantum mechanics, meaning it's something we don't want you to deal with anymore, Mr. Electrical Engineer. We want the physicist to deal with it, who doesn't know a damn thing what to do with it in a practical sense, except to garnish a lot of money for grants and do studies and not come up with anything practical, and keep it out of the domain of practicality for the rest of us by saying, oh, it's laws of physics you're violating when you try to get over unity, free energy, where the ether doesn't exist, yada yada yada. So, what if time is the neutron, or neutrino, or whatever you want to call it, anything related to the neutron? Transverse waves of electromagnetic spectrum is the electron, and which is a little strange because electron volts, anyway, be that as it may, and the proton is the longitudinal wave of the magnetodielectric medium, counter space. So electrons are in space, the proton is in counter space, and the neutron is time, which binds the two together. In other words, the neutron binds in time and kinetically binds in time the two potential energies of magnetism exhibited by the electron, right? Electrons move in the wire, they exhibit magnetism, right? But the proton is considered passive, and that's exactly what electrostatics implies. The static, it's passive, it just sits there, right? Doesn't travel. Well, the lines of force for the shell of atomic theory, namely the electron shells, the lines of force are transverse because the electron goes into orbit around the center of mass of the atom, and that creates an electromagnetic wave. So now we're getting into wave versus particle theories. The proton exhibits, and I guess time, I suppose, too, the particle aspect, whereas the electron exhibits the wave, because the electron goes into orbit, and that is the line of force of the transverse wave, is orbital. It goes around the wire, while the longitudinal wave is an open line. It's an open circuit. It doesn't make a complete circuit. It doesn't go around in a circle. It's an open path, which is basically a line segment that terminates on 2 points, and those 2 points are the centers of 2 atoms in the universe. And the whole universe is tied together in a neuronal network, like a brain, a big brain, of longitudinal waves that terminate on atoms on either end. And so the atom sends out a myriad, an infinite, an undeterminable quantity of longitudinal waves that are open paths that terminate on various points in the universe, all of which are the centers of atoms, or protons, or neutrons, I don't know, either protons or neutrons or both. So we get this this translation between the old school and the suppression of the old school, which now becomes the new school. In other words, the new school being quantum physics, and the old school being Tesla and Steinmetz and all those guys in that era before it all got suppressed and swept under the rug with relativism of Einstein. and quantum mechanics and quantum theory and physics. And the laws of physics, meaning we all become Gestapo police to each other. In a very mean way. We've all become mean. We've gotten this mean streak when it comes to knowledge, in how we treat each other. It's as if we're given carte blanche to perform Kristallnacht, not just one night in the history of Germany, but now all the time among us all, any time that anybody should try to talk about free energy over unity or yada yada. You just, it's a nice way to organize an anti-rebellion in support of the establishment, which is garnering extra bucks for our stupidity and our violence towards each other when it comes to trying to express a line of thought that is not supported by corporate vested interests, including government, which is a cartel with business, which is fascism, but we won't go there. Too much. I mentioned it, now we'll move along. But it's the translation between how electricity is put together from its three constituent ingredients and how an atom is put together with its three constituent ingredients. Is it any kind of happy coincidence that they're related? I don't think so. I don't think so. If you own a cell phone, the thing you do is that you ignore it when it's ringing, because it's a bunch of callers who want to sell you used vacuum cleaners anyway, so why bother picking it up? At least that's the way in my case. Okay, so there you have that translation, and it puts quantum mechanics back into the realm of practicality, of the electrical engineer, where it belongs, because the whole universe is electrical. We know this. Everything can be translated into electrical behavior and is replaceable by electrical behavior. So like if you've got dynamite and you want to blow it up, you study the electrodynamic behavior of dynamite undergoing explosion, and now you can replicate that explosion without the dynamite using pure electrodynamics alone and blow up something with the same force. It's this is what scared the social engineers when they realized what Tesla had unleashed and what had to go under the rug. Either that or it was our own stupidity of not acknowledging a genius and basically thinking he was a crackpot. But either case, either line of reasoning that you want to choose coincides with each other's motives and vested interests. Yeah, then there's the profit motive, a third conspiracy theory. So, when you think about it, conspiracy theory is simply a different term for collective consciousness. When everybody has the same consciousness, they think along the same lines, even though they may not be the same type of people, but in a certain sense, in terms of consciousness, they are. Because all I think about is power, money, and sex. Either one of those three, and it tends to go around in a circular fashion, repetitive circular fashion among those three. I have to admit, yeah, it's easy to think about sex. But there is a way out of that, and it's called the metabolism is being sluggish, and you just give it what it needs. It needs lots of iodine and iodide to get the metabolism going, and then before you know it, you're thinking of better things than just sex all the time. But power and money, those three things. Because money has to do with survival, the first chakra. Sex has to do with belonging, the second chakra. and power is the Manipura, the third chakra, the belly button chakra. And that's where the consciousness of humanity revolves around, the first three chakras, the base chakras. Never rising beyond the belly to the heart, let alone the throat or the third eye or the crown or beyond, Just caught up in the first three chakras. And that's what we've done. We've bawderized the truth and turned it into mush in order that we not be sovereign and powerful in our own right, capable of our own, I want to say masturbation, capable of our own self-pleasure. Because don't you think it's self-pleasure when we're self-reliant and self-deterministic and self-empowering and self-sufficient and self-realized? Don't you think all those self-oriented terms, it means taking back what belongs to ourselves, knowledge, truth, and the beauty that goes with it, the elegant beauty that goes with knowing how things actually work instead of how we are told they work, to keep it out of our own hands and to keep it in the hands of specialists and authority figures who know better. You're right. What can you do, It's the way social engineering works. It's good for vested interests and bad for humanitarian interests. But this is the beginning, the dawning of the age of Aquarius, right? The dawning of the age of enlightenment, the dawning of a new era in which, on the one hand, we still have the continued escalatory evolution of vested interests. They're not going away yet. But on the other hand, we have way in the background, still hardly noticeable, the evolution of consciousness on this planet, evolving into something more fruitful and more humanitarian and more kindred to the spirit of the earth. The vested interest consciousness is still trying to act like the earth is something to dominate, exploit, and explore, and rape and pillage for profit motive. Or else we wouldn't be taking down the rainforests of South America, Sorte American, just to make hamburger meat, and then working very diligently in turning South America into a New World desert, just like the Sahara. Another Sahara. We don't need another Sahara. We don't need another Gobi Desert. We don't need another desert. We don't. We got plenty of them. We got too many of them. Anywho, but psionic devices can bring rain. Trevor Constable figured that one out real good, and with the help of Peter Lindemann, who needs to be given credit. But Trevor Constable did most of the preparatory work, just about all of it, the preparatory work, in extension of that fellow, Wilhelm Reich. So Trevor Constable really deserves a Nobel Prize for what he's done, despite the fact that people may not like, his politics or his ethics. He did pioneer the engineering of rain in a very psionic manner, without cloud seeding or any kind of strong arm manipulation. And actually somebody else, John Shizuka, in the body of John Bedini, came up with a very simple way to make it rain cats and dogs. If you want to make it rain, boy, John Bedini really made it pouring rain using one of John Shizuka's devices. Wow. So there are multiple ways of making rain, and repopulating this planet with a forest which it deserves on all of its land, and all of the algae, seaweed forests to repopulate any polluted areas where they cannot go, such as LA Harbor, At least Malibu has seaweed beds, but LA Harbor lost its seaweed bed a long time ago because it's just plain too polluted with all the sewage that gets dumped into there. So there's a lot of deforestation both above the ocean line and below it that has happened to create a desert of one sort or another on this planet, and it really goes with a certain consciousness. So I can't blame anybody, and I can only do so much to try to help it along without getting wiped out in the process of trying to stick my nose in what some people consider not my business, namely other people's profits and other people's controlled domain. I'm not considered a social engineer, right? I don't have the privilege of that status such that I would be welcomed into the hallowed halls of those few handful of people who like to deem themselves the engineers of society, and it is a handful. Not bigger than a handful. And they're not bankers, by the way. Close, you're warm. No, these are people who like to hide and remain nameless and blameless. So we won't know their names. We'll just know there's a handful. Anywho, but as an activist, trying to stir things up by flapping my gums and exhaling my hot air to inflate something other than a balloon or bubblegum, I thought I would speak my mind, because it's worth sharing a thought if it should help evolve our knowledge of how things work. I flunked physics twice. Well, no, once. I almost flunked it twice when I took it as astrophysics, because it has no relevance to the real world. Unless you get into mechanical engineering, then at least it has some semblance of relevancy. Or unless you get into astronomy and want to get your own telescope, then again, see, it has something linked with the real world. But when they start doing things that requires grant money in the gazillions of dollars, then you know it's rubbish. Any kind of experimentation does cost money, but it shouldn't have to require a government taking out a loan. That's when you know it's rubbish. That's when you should know that it's rubbish. They're trying to bend over backwards rather than just walk erect in order to hide something from public relevance, so that we don't get the benefit at all, and we don't even get to participate on a shoestring budget, much less get the benefit of being told the straight honest truth instead of a cockamamie BS. Okay.